My name is Peter Wolfl. Welcome to Careers. Careers is a television show designed to give you a better understanding about your options and what's involved in various different occupations. What does it take to be successful in those occupations? And we're going to be using real-life examples. However, tonight's show is going to be on a more general basis. It's going to be about the philosophy behind careers and about career planning. Our first guest tonight is Liz Nelson. She is a career counselor with Employment and Immigration Canada. She was also involved with the development of a computer program called Choices, which helps people decide what career occupations are possibly best for them based upon their abilities and their interests and possibly several other factors involved in career selection. Welcome, Liz, to the show.
Thank you.
Our second guest is Liz Sayer. She is a career consultant who has her own practice, and she focuses on workplace-related issues. Welcome, Liz, to the show.
Hello.
Now, before we really get into talking into a lot of depth about career planning, let's first talk a little bit about yourselves, your background, and why, for instance, did you decide to become a career consultant? Liz Nelson?
We'll get the Liz's confused.
Right.
Well, I think in many instances, like a lot of students, when I went through school, we really didn't know what we were going to do, but we did go off to university. And I suppose I was fortunate enough in my case that one of the years I was at university, I was able to obtain a summer job with the Department of Employment and Immigration in one of their student summer placement offices. While I was going to university, I held this job for several summers, and then when I graduated, I was able to get in on a more permanent basis, working with the student program. Mm-hmm. And it progressed from there. Once I had worked with that and felt that I had had a good background with it, I tried to look at what other options were available within the department. And I found that there was an opportunity to become an employment counselor. Mm-hmm. And in order to become an employment counselor, I had to move 150 miles from my home, so I had to make some very big decisions at that point. But I went into employment counseling, and then 5 years after that, I looked around for other options again within the department and found that there were opportunities to become a consultant, first at a district level in Eastern Ontario, and then finally at the regional level for all of Ontario and Toronto. Mm-hmm. So I've really progressed myself for the last maybe 15 years through one avenue, which is the Department of Employment and Immigration.
Well, that's great. Are you finding that your job is challenging on a day-to-day basis, what you're doing right now?
Very much so. I've been in the job in Toronto for 3 years now, and I still find it very interesting. There's a lot of variety with it. One night we'll be doing something like this, another day I'll be training counselors, another day I may be working on policy and planning decisions. So there's a nice mix of duties involved in the job. It's not something that I plan to stay in for the rest of my life. So I am also in that process constantly of making career plans.
Career change as well, eventually. And Liz Sayer?
Hi there.
What about you? What do you think? First of all, why did you get involved in this line of work?
Well, again, I didn't start out to do this. I was like many other high school students at the end, waiting for the light to go on and great insight. And at the end of grade 13, I thought, oh, wow, I'll be a home economics teacher. And I lasted 4 days in 2 physics labs at the University of Guelph, and since I was already there, I decided to stay on in psychology, and after my first class, I just loved it. So my first love, my enjoyment was psychology. I followed that along and eventually went into teaching, but guidance counseling. Mm-hmm. And after, that was the first job, and after doing that, first in a level 3 school, an occupational school, and then in collegiate, I still wasn't happy. So ironically, I went through a number of tests, career interest tests, as part of my master's program, and found that my enjoyment of teaching was reflected in the tests. And I followed the direction of the test and the counseling that came out of it. And, you know, everything comes full circle. That's what I'm doing for other people today.
I see. So a lot of the counseling really paid off in getting you into the position that you are in now.
It was very fascinating. Yeah.
And you have your own private practice? Mm-hmm. So in effect, you're also an entrepreneur.
Yes, I'm an entrepreneur. In a bad way for a career counselor. I didn't mean to do this. I think I backed into it. But very much I'm running a small business, which means everything from typing,
accounting, marketing.
That's right, typing when your assistant doesn't show up, and occasionally I get to do some career counseling too.
Well, that's great. I know every time I try to reach you,
It's been
somebody
busy.
else answers who has a very professional manner about them in any
That's
case.
good.
What is a career, though? I'm wondering, because sometimes people look at careers in different ways. When I think of careers, I can think of it right now in three ways, and maybe there are more. One would be to be as an occupational point of view. Let's say you're a lawyer or a doctor or a dentist or something. Another one might be from a functional point of view. When you're asked what kind of career are you in, some people may say, well, I'm in marketing or in finance or accounting or something from that kind of perspective, more of a broader perspective. And in other cases, they may say, well, I work for Bell Canada, and that may be their career, and they may be switching a lot of different jobs within that one company. I guess the Japanese, for instance, are especially big on that kind of thing. When you join a company, you're there for life.
Quite often I think it's changed. It used to be a career was a profession. You had to say, well, it was something that you went through university for a long time for. I think the definition has modified considerably in that a career is a series of connected jobs. So you can be in a secretarial career, administrative career, a career with Bell or Hydro or something like that. But it's a series of connected jobs. So there is some suggestion of background experience.
How do you feel that maybe the whole concept of careers has changed over the years? Are people looking at it now in a different perspective, different light than they maybe did 50 years ago?
I think very much so. I think the concept of the one-job career is very much a thing of the past. Maybe 25, 50 years ago, people went through a fairly predictable lifestyle pattern, and that usually meant going from childhood to your educational process, maybe to your job, marriage, family, and then leisure time, basically, which was retirement. Nowadays, people don't follow those same predictable life patterns, and society doesn't expect them to, which is one of the reasons they're not following them. People may go from education to marriage to leisure time to job, back to education, and it's a constantly changing and very individualized process now. So what's happening in that process is people are moving from job to job and from career to career and occupation to occupation with a much greater frequency than ever before. And that's very much resulted in a change from the idea of the one occupation career to developing a career path that really is the combination of a variety of different occupations and different patterns in your life.
So are a lot of people having more than one career in their lifetime now, would you say? Is that pretty common?
The average, I think, Richard Bowles, who was a guru in this, What Color Is Your Parachute,
right.
started out with estimating 2 to 3 different careers. And recently I heard something as high as 15, but I think somebody's taking more than their share. There's another thing to think about that, is that with the economy, some people are being forced to change, and this didn't happen so much 25 years ago. But the layoffs, the downsizing, the way the economy shifts from one foot to its other, it's forcing people to change.
And technological change has certainly been more rampant recently than it's ever been in the past. Every year we see jobs disappear, occupations completely wiped out. New ones may replace them, but those new ones require a whole different set of skills. So someone who did an occupation that may be phased out may not necessarily be able to move into the new occupation without considerable training, or perhaps with a completely different set of people skills required. The move from more technical and manual skills into some of the people-oriented skills have been a good example of that.
Well, sometimes it seems like as if whole industries are springing up.
Yeah.
Look at the computer industry, personal computers. That hasn't really been around all that long.
And all the adjuncts to it. The people in the office next to mine are in computer leasing and rental. They started 3 years ago, and they've just gone down and opened a New York office, a London, England office, and all of that is not, part of the technology, but part of the offshoots. What's going
And
on.
services, it's interesting. Service sector is going to be one of the very big sectors of the future, and it's growing larger every day. But if you just walk into a grocery store nowadays and you see the variety of ready-made foods, you can almost produce gourmet meals without even having to know how to cook nowadays. And that's a new service that people are
that's good for
providing.
me.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful for many of us.
That's the impact of the dual career couple.
That's right.
Neither one is going to stay home and slave over a hot stove all day.
Well, I imagine
Time's
that's
of the
starting
essence.
other jobs as well. What about the impact of women coming into the workforce? That certainly must have a big impact on the job market nowadays. Whereas typically they maybe stayed home and they looked after the kids. Now they're no longer looking after the kids. They're rather bringing in more money. Other industries like Molly Maid and
That's right. Well, that's the
springing up
service
and-
industry. I think in my parents' time it would have seemed ludicrous to have only the rich people had maid service. But there's all the other things, as you say, the foods and daycares and child care and anything that will make our life easier.
Mm-hmm. Now, if on the other hand, other careers or occupations seem to be fading away, being replaced by these new ones, it seems like you must have to be pretty flexible nowadays in order to survive.
Flexibility is the key. Flexibility in planning for change, so that you are anticipating where some of the changes are going to come and learning the skills before they're necessarily required. And by that I mean that if you sit in an occupation where the skills are going to be outdated, and I think of some of the printing occupations, and many of them that are being replaced by computerized systems, if you wait till that day comes when they lay you off because you don't have the skills to move into the computerized fields, then you're going to have a lot of problems with your occupations and your careers. If, on the other hand, you can anticipate those kinds of changes and take courses and find even other occupations where you may learn the skills, then you're going to be much more prepared for the change when it comes.
So.
And it's not even so much, I mean, a lot of the companies will target and will train. There's a lot of, the big companies are being very, very responsible. The problems come often more with the personality of the individual, a person who greets change as a threat rather than embracing it as an opportunity. Those are the ones that have the greatest difficulty.
I see.
Yeah.
So career planning is clearly very important nowadays. What is career planning, and how does someone go about it? I guess you both have different approaches to this, so maybe we'll start with Liz Nelson. What do you think about
Well, I guess career planning in its most basic form is really just really a blueprint for your future, deciding what you want to do with your life, and part of that life is your career, and then developing goals and a plan to meet those goals. That's a very generic way of putting it, but it actually involves a number of things. It involves getting to know yourself, a lot about yourself, getting to know the world of work and the kinds of occupations and the factors that influence occupations, developing some sort of sense of a direction. It isn't necessarily making that one decision of which career it's going to be and going for that particular thing, but it's deciding more or less where you want to go, what kinds of steps do you want to take to meet your goals, and then being constantly aware of the kinds of things that can influence that. Things like as simple as somebody wanting to become a doctor and planning on that from fairly early on, finding when they get to medical school they haven't made the cut and they're not admitted, and all of a sudden their hopes and plans are just dashed, and they have to start again. In that process of planning, if you've considered that as one of the contingencies, then at least you're prepared to look at other directions, and you're not going to waste a lot of time and a lot of worry trying to decide what to do next. So it's constantly creating alternatives, planning for contingencies, and then reevaluating.
Have some kind of a fallback position in case your first choice doesn't work out exactly the way you want to.
And if I see career planning as really the way I practice is as organizing your thinking around things. So a lot of people say, oh, they're so used to going to a doctor and getting a pill, so they come to career counseling and they want to tell me what to do. And it's not our job to tell people what to do. It's to help them to, as you say, know yourself, but you can't pick up a mirror and, know yourself. So the format I follow anyways is that through my experience and research, I found that they have to have established their priorities in 4 areas. One is their abilities, aptitudes, skills. What can I do? And then be realistic, comparing themselves to other people. Maybe riding a bike is your best sport, but you don't ride in an international competition. Secondly, interests. What are the tasks or activities that you want to fill your day with? You want to talk with people, shift paper, whatever. Third is personality. What's the working environment? Do you want to work with a lot of people, a few people, high pressure, low pressure? There's a lot of things going on. And then values, which is really the key, which I always say is the sleeper in all this. It's the motivators. What's important to you? I mean, is your carrot money or recognition or fame or helping others or achievement?
Yes,
all the above, yeah. That's usually what I get.
I'm sure.
No. We have to put it in order. It has to be 1, 2, 3. You have to then define it, and then you have to say, and how will I recognize it if I trip over it? How much money is enough, in other words.
Right.
And if they go through that steps, they find that it makes decision-making quite easy, and they can consider several options that are all fall into that organizational pattern.
From your experience and what you may know, do you know any statistics? Are people, a lot of them, miserable in their jobs? Are a lot of people really in the wrong career?
That's a loaded question.
I think a lot of people think they're in the wrong career, and I think one of the reasons why is because they've never really looked at what is making them dissatisfied or unhappy. Sometimes people think they want to make a career change because they feel unhappy at the moment. And the reason for that unhappiness may not really be related that much to the occupation. It may be related to something in their lifestyle, or it may be related to something in the occupation that can be changed. So before someone makes a very serious career change, they really should look and see whether they can make any changes in the environment they're currently working in, and whether that environment's still going to be suitable for them, say, 5 years from now. And beyond that, then if the answer to those kinds of questions is no, it's not going to satisfy me, it's not going to challenge me, maybe then career change is what they should be doing.
Since 1981, not a lot of people are quitting their jobs
No.
before they get the next one. They used to do that. They don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Jobs are too hard to come by.
Well, we're going to take a very short break right now. We'll be back in just a few moments when we'll start to talk about the Choices computer program. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Career Show. Liz Nelson, I was wondering, can you tell me a little bit about how the Choices computer program was developed? I saw it once at the exhibition. I found it really quite interesting, sitting down at a computer and answering all these questions about yourself. My background is engineering with an MBA in business, but after going through all these different questions, it asked me what kind of hours do I like to work, and I like to work both nights and days. I don't like always working the same hours if possible. Sometimes I like to work indoors and sometimes outdoors. I noticed it asked me all these kinds of various questions also about my personality and my temperament and what kind of interests I have, artistic for instance. And ultimately it said my best career would be being a talk show host or being a motion picture producer. So here I'm trying it now, and I don't know whether this is going to work or not, but in any case, what are some of the theories that went in behind the Choices program?
Well, I guess probably the most basic theory behind Choices is something called trait factor, where you look at occupational factors, things that belong in an occupation, such as the typical interests that a person would have in an occupation, salary levels, just the things you've just mentioned there, hours of work, a number of different factors like that. And then you take an individual and look at the characteristics that particular individual has. So you look at that individual's interests, the kind of salary requirements they have, the hours of work they want to work, and so on. And then you try to make a match between the two. And that's essentially I guess, the theoretical background behind the system itself. So what Choices does is it takes information about an individual and through the process of matching those with occupational data that's in its basic data banks, it suggests occupations that would suit you based on some very specific criteria that you've established for yourself. The main thing I think to stress about Choices is it's not a standalone program. The version you saw at the CNE is a quick demonstration version that people walk in and use in 15 minutes and walk out, and it's fun. The version that somebody would use in a Canada Employment Centre would involve considerable amount of counselling before they went on the system, preparation of materials, answering questions about themselves, the kinds of things that Liz has mentioned as well, those things that are important to them, the kinds of lifestyle decisions that are influenced by someone, for example, who can't work nights and can only work days, and a number of factors like that. They feed it into the computer. They get lists of occupations and a variety of other data from the system. And then they sit down with a counselor who helps them interpret the data and make sure that it's meaningful. And then really they work on where they want to go from there. It's not a system that's contained in and of itself. It's something that you work on to give you some information on occupations and careers, and then you move on. You still don't make a decision at the end of that time.
Oh, I see. Some further counseling is required.
Further counseling, and very often on the part of the individual using it, an awful lot more research and information gathering before they're going to be prepared to make a decision.
Yeah. Well, when I did that Choices program, that was about 10 years ago, and I still haven't done anything about it, maybe until now. Anyway, Liz, Sarah, I was wondering, what about your point of view about all this? Because when I was speaking to you on the phone earlier, you told me that you would like to put a little bit more of a personal flavor into your counseling, but at the same time, sometimes you are also using computer programs in your work.
Yeah, we talked before the show, and we have different thoughts. Choices isn't one of my preferred tools. But I use different tools, and I use a battery of tests or standardized checklists, and interviewing and counseling, and the 4 factors I mentioned earlier: the abilities, interests, personality, and values. I always use at least 2 measures within each one because everybody's different. And what happens when you use a test, an interest inventory? It's really based on the theories and the thoughts and the ideas of the person or group of people who developed it. And it will match for a great number of people, but if you happen to be the person it doesn't match for, then we've got a problem. So I go after using at least 2 instruments so that we're looking for consistency. 2 of the most often used interest inventories are the Jackson Vocational Interest Survey and the Strong-Campbell Interest Inventory. And I might use both of those. Quite often I will only use the Strong for men because it's, in my research, more sex-biased. And the Jackson was standardized on a Canadian as well as American sample.
Sex-biased?
Well, what will happen with, it's based on something called the Holland Code, which was developed a long time ago, and it was developed on men and for men.
Oh.
And what happens that way is that it fits men's experience well. It doesn't fit women's experience very well. And Holland himself said that it was developed for men and didn't work as well for women, but that sort of information has been kind of ignored over the years. And so what happens is if young women are socialized to like art and flower arranging, all that sort of thing, or children, taking care of children, it may suggest then that they go into child care. What happens really is that they have young children and they'd like to take care of children at home but not at work, and it doesn't take that differentiation into account.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been my area of research, and I've been concerned about it.
Well, that's interesting. Do you feel that there has been enough emphasis by the secondary and the public school systems on career planning and career counseling? I've noticed that a lot of students, and in fact I was tempted myself after high school to just go into a general arts and science type of program at university because I really didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I felt like maybe putting it off even a little bit further. Are people coming out of high school not knowing what they want to do, and as a result eventually get themselves into university, and after university find themselves without a job or having a hard time getting a
I
job?
get quite a few after first year university, but not as many as we would have seen. The Ministry of Education in Ontario anyways, and the boards of education have put a lot of money and time into developing policy and programs. I mean, some of the boards of education have books this thick. And there are pockets of schools where there's just excellent stuff going on. We still have, like in any profession, some throwbacks who don't like all this modern funny stuff and don't take advantage of what the boards, the ministry put out. I'd say we're having a higher hit rate, but there's still some falling through the cracks.
I still think, too, that you've got a fairly high dropout rate that may not be necessarily making use of what systems are available in the school system. So you are still seeing a lot of young people coming out of the system now who really don't have a clue what they want to do, or have made very inappropriate choices. People still make career choices, believe it or not, based on the fact that their friend goes to a certain school and they want to go to that school too.
Yeah.
Or, somebody else does a job, using the term job, that they see and they like that job, not being aware that that job may not exist as part of the career process. It may just be a very individualized job. So they really don't understand what an occupation is.
Okay.
It's not sitting at this chair necessarily and doing it at this particular place. It may be doing it anywhere.
We only have 3 minutes left, so a couple of quick questions before we wrap up. Are there any jobs that you foresee as becoming very popular within the next 5 years for those people who are just contemplating the beginning of their first career at this time?
Well, certainly we talked about the service sector is being predicted. Some of the problems are a lot of those jobs are at low-level jobs. But anything that's directed at leisure or travel, people have a lot more disposable income and a lot more time around the leisure industry. The computer applications, not necessarily the programming, but combining computers with any of the other occupations gives you a slight edge. Always put 2 areas together, and then it gives you a niche.
And there's
a little
also
bit more flexibility.
Exactly, and there's also predictions of a number of occupations in the medical field. I think for many years we've heard about the geriatric area, for example, as being a big one.
All right.
As baby boomers grow up and their parents get older, and they eventually will get older, there will be many more occupations related to the medical profession.
Well, do you have any final suggestions? Let's say if somebody wants to learn more about the Choices computer program, where do they contact?
Well, right now we have 19 Choices sites in Ontario, in Canada Employment Centres right across the province. It's not available in every single centre, but many of them have access to it. The best thing if someone wants to find out about Choices is to simply call or go to the nearest Canada Employment Centre and ask if they can access Choices.
Interesting. And Liz, what about, how can people make more use of your service? Who do they contact?
They contact me for 928-1527. I'm at St. Clair and Young.
Okay.
But I'd also recommend that they look into the community college counseling services as well. There's some very fine ones around, as well as the Jewish Vocational Service in Toronto and the North York Vocational Career Center.
Okay.
There's a lot of good things around.
Can we get that phone number once more in case
It's
people missed it?
928-1527.
Great. Okay, well, that's the end of our show today. Thank you for joining us, Liz and Liz.
Thank you, Peter.
It's been a pleasure. Next week, our topic will be lawyers and everything that's involved about the legal profession. Have you ever considered being a lawyer, or a judge for that matter, or any of the other related fields in the legal profession? If so, make sure that you tune in next week. I'm Peter Wolfl. For all of us here at the studio, good luck in your career.